slave. I don't work for you. I don't know what to do with some people. I just want to punch them in the face sometimes.
We'll kick things off at a Checkers drive-in restaurant in Florida. CEO Rick Silva went undercover as Alex, a trainee, only to discover one of the most abusive managers in the show's history. From the moment undercover Rick started his shift, the general manager, a man identified only as Stevens, was running the place like his personal fiefdom. He barked orders at employees non-stop and created a tense, miserable atmosphere.
No problem, sir. I have some down now.
At one point, as Rick worked at the fry station with a crew member named Todd, the manager snapped at Todd to stop talking and get back to work.
So if you go on overtime, I can take you outside and beat you up, right?
It went from bad to worse when Stevens began threatening the employees. He literally said he would beat Todd if he didn't hustle faster. This was not just tough love or urgency, it was outright bullying and intimidation. Rick tried to stay in character, but you could see the disbelief on his face as this manager yelled and demeaned his crew. Imagine Undercover Boss meets Kitchen Nightmares, except the nightmare was the manager himself. The breaking point came when Stevens berated Todd over taking out the trash. Todd confided to Rick, still thinking he was just a coworker, that he needed this job to support his mom, so he felt he had no choice but to endure the abuse.
Because I do it because I need to help my mom.
This brought the young man to tears, which was heartbreaking and infuriating for Rick to watch. At that moment, Rick realized the situation was beyond a learning experience. It was time for action. So, in a move that almost never happens on Undercover Boss, Rick broke cover on the spot. He pulled the manager aside out of earshot of the other employees and confronted him directly. Rick asked point blank, what excuse is there to talk to people without being respectful to them? Stevens shockingly doubled down. He insisted he hadn't been disrespectful and argued that if he didn't raise his voice, the employees wouldn't obey.
Have to talk up. They will not listen to you unless they.
Who's they?
The crew.
He even told Rick, not knowing he was the CEO, that if an employee refused to be talked to that way, it meant they couldn't handle the job. Wrong answer, my dude. At that, Rick had heard enough. He essentially went from undercover trainee to furious CEO mode in seconds. Rick removed his disguise and revealed, I'm Rick Silva, the CEO of Checkers and Rallies.
CEO for this company.
You can imagine the manager's face. Talk about instant karma. Rick let Stevens know that his behavior was completely unacceptable and far below the company's standards. In fact, Rick was so appalled that he did something unprecedented. He shut the restaurant down for the night right then and there. We're done, shut it down, he declared, sending all the employees home early.
Right here, right now, we're gonna shut the restaurant down.
He told Stevens that the location would not continue operating under his watch that evening. This was a huge deal, closing a restaurant in the middle of the dinner rush to make a point. But Rick wanted to send a clear message that Checkers would rather lose a bit of profit than allow employees to be treated that way.
The reason I'm shutting this restaurant down is because of you guys. The truth is, if we haven't trained you to do it, you're doing the best you can.
It was an ultimate power move, and honestly, viewers at home were cheering. Rick essentially fired the manager on the spot. At minimum, he removed him from duty pending further action. As Rick later explained, while nothing the manager did put employees or customers in physical danger, his tone and attitude were too terse and not up to the company's standards. Rick realized this manager simply wasn't prepared or fit to run the restaurant. The aftermath was just as important. The very next day, that Checkers location reopened under new management. Stevens was relieved of his duties. Corporate sent him off for remedial training, though many suspect that was a polite way of saying he was on very thin ice. The crew, including Todd, got a new boss who would, hopefully, treat them with basic respect. And in the final reveal segment of the show, Rick rewarded Todd for enduring such a toxic environment. He gave Todd $15,000 to help him and his mother, and to assist Todd in pursuing his culinary education.
We're going to give you $15,000. Wow. To help cover those expenses.
A sweet ending for the employee who suffered, and a well-deserved reckoning for the manager who caused it. If you love these wild undercover stories, smash that like button and hit subscribe. We have plenty more crazy boss videos on the way, and you don't want to miss them. 3. Buffalo Wings and Rings, Bullying Manager Gets the Boot, Season 7, Episode 1. The third story moves from beans to buffalo wings. In a Season 7 episode of Undercover Boss, Nader Masade, CEO of Buffalo Wings and Rings, found himself face to face with a manager whose leadership style could be summed up in one word: bully.
Got the scumbag gold chain, the thick nerd glasses, and the shiny bald head.
Buffalo Wings and Rings is a family-friendly sports restaurant franchise, but what Nader discovered at one of his franchise locations was anything but friendly. Disguised as a worker named Pete, Nader dropped into a particular restaurant and met a manager named Wes. It didn't take long for Wes to show his true colors. To set the scene, Wes was an intense, hot-headed kitchen manager who seemed to think fear was the only way to get respect from his team.
Fear equals respect. You're gonna have to rule with an iron fist.
In a conversation with Undercover Nader, Wes proudly declared that fear gets respect in his restaurant. Yes, he said that out loud to a stranger on his first day. Yikes. If that motto wasn't bad enough, Wes went on to insult his entire staff.
High school kids. The average person that works back here, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, they're dumb.
He called his employees dumbasses, saying most of them were just useless high school kids. And the cherry on top, he quipped, "You can't ask dumb people to do smart things." Just imagine being the CEO and hearing this kind of talk. Nader was upset and frankly disgusted. Wes was essentially bragging about ruling by intimidation and openly demeaning the people who worked for him. It became clear that under Wes's management, the restaurant had a toxic environment. Other employees seemed nervous around him. Some customers might have even sensed the tension. For Nader, who deeply cared about fostering a positive culture, this was the opposite of everything he stood for. He later described Wes as nothing but a bully, and it's hard to disagree when you hear those quotes. As the day went on, Nader observed more of Wes's behavior. Barking orders, scolding staff harshly for minor mistakes, and generally acting like a drill sergeant who never learned the difference between firm leadership and outright abuse. The undercover CEO reached his limit when Wes's bullying veered into territory that could drive employees to quit on the spot. Nader realized if he didn't step in, good employees would continue to suffer under this guy. So, much like Rick Silva in the Checkers story, Nader decided to break cover earlier than planned. The well-being of his team was more important than sticking to the show's script. Nader removed his disguise and revealed himself as the CEO to the entire staff and to Wes.
President and CEO, Buffalo Wings and Rings.
Okay.
You can imagine Wes's face. One moment he's puffing his chest, calling everyone dumb, and the next moment the dude he's been saying this to says, "Surprise, I'm your CEO." Instant karma activation. Nader wasted no time in telling Wes how unacceptable his management style was. In fact, his first words to Wes after revealing himself were reportedly, "I will not allow anybody to be bullied." That sentence alone gives you an idea of how seriously he took this. Nader was visibly emotional. Some reports say he was shaking with anger as he confronted the manager in front of the staff. It was a powerful moment. The employees who had been tormented by Wes suddenly had the big boss sticking up for them right there in the kitchen. What Nader did next was equally impactful. Since this was a franchise location, the CEO worked with the franchise owner of that store to address Wes's future. Nader encouraged the franchise owner to fire Wes on the spot.
Better chance at success if we separate ways.
And that's exactly what happened. Wes was terminated from his position because of his behavior. One moment he's the kitchen tyrant, the next he's out of a job. You could practically hear the cheers from the rest of the staff when this guy was shown the door. It was like a villain getting vanquished in a movie, but it was real life and probably a huge relief to everyone who worked there. Nader didn't stop at just firing the bad apple. He also took this as a teachable moment for the whole company. In the follow-up, he doubled down on training programs for managers, emphasizing respectful leadership. Clearly, something had gone wrong in either hiring or training to let someone like Wes rise to a management role, and Nader took responsibility for fixing that. He talked about servant leadership in interviews, the idea that a true leader supports their team rather than tearing them down. This aligned with his actions on the show, where he demonstrated that empathy and respect are non-negotiable in his restaurants. This incident underscores a recurring theme in these stories. When employees are mistreated, a good leader won't stand by and let it happen. They'll intervene, even if it means blowing their cover or making a scene on national TV.